All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, and welcome to our latest session today in the Build Your AutoCAD IQ series. We are happy to have you all with us. Today it will be Volker and myself. For anybody returning, Christina is normally with us, but we gave her the day off today, so it will be Volker and myself. So we are going to be looking at layers today and different ways to work with layers and become more productive in that way. So as we do if you've been before, we're just going to run a few polls off the bat, if that's okay. If we could get your feedback, that would be fantastic. Just looking to see how many folks have been with us before. So looking like about 80% of you are returnees. So as usual, glad to have you back. And welcome to the newcomers as well. We hope this is not your only stay with us. And I will close that. I'm just going to run one more quickly here, just get an idea of which software everybody's using. We do focus on AutoCAD LT in these series, but most of it is applicable to the other versions as well. And looks like about 50% on LT, 35% on AutoCAD, and the rest on the vertical. So that's great to see the spread across the board that way. So with that said, I will turn the session over to Volker, and we'll learn about some layers.
All right. Thanks, Sean. Can you hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Great. So I hope everybody else can as well. So welcome, everybody, those who have returned for another session, and especially those who are here for the first time joining us with the webinars. For those who have returned, of course, we have to do this little bit of a housekeeping here for all new attendees. Go ahead and feel free to leave questions in the chat window. We'll answer those as time allows. That may be during the session or at the end of the presentation. This session will be recorded, and the slide deck will be available on our AutoCAD IQ location. The link will be made available in the follow-up survey that you'll be getting from GoToMeeting, or GoToWebinar, I should say. So you can also check out our landing page where you can find links to the YouTube uploads of these recordings. I'd like you to note, I'll point this out because we still get a lot of people asking, are these being recorded? Where can I find the recording? You can either go to the Autodesk channel on YouTube, or you can go to this landing page, and if you take a look here, lower right-hand corner on the little image of a video, there's a playlist option. All the videos are available through that playlist just by clicking on it. If you need to or want to leave feedback, you can do so on our feedback page, or you can email us at autodesk.help.webinars@autodesk.com. Yeah, and this is better than emailing Sean or myself or Christina for that matter, as we do tend to get fairly busy. So some of the previous webinars, we are now on webinar 23. Time has flown by. So these are just some of them that are available, well, about half of them that are available on the YouTube channel. And a lot of the stuff that I talked about in those previous webinars, or Christina talked about, or whoever, we do tend to use those topics, those functions in our current webinars. Okay, one more thing here is just want to remind you again about the Autodesk Knowledge Network. Right now, these are the top 5 most viewed articles at the time that I put this PowerPoint together, I should say. And this particular website, a great place to find solutions to issues you're having, tutorials, downloads such as the service packs or any hot fixes, sample drawings, troubleshooting. A lot of good information here. If you haven't been here before, you should go check it out. Okay, today's agenda. finally there. We're going to talk about layers. Get an understanding of what layers are all about. We'll take a look at some of the properties that are handled by layers. We'll obviously create some layers and modify those layers. We're going to touch on layer states, how you can save the look of how your layers are at the time. We'll talk a little bit about layer overrides and, of course, a lot of the tools that are not part of the layer dialog but are accessory tools, so to speak, for working with layers. So what about layers? What are they? Well, layers, think of a layer as a sheet of paper, just like you would as, if you were board drafting, if any of you are familiar with that. I'm sure many of you are. But that's all it is. Our current layer would be our sheet of paper that we're drawing on. Unlike a board drafter, AutoCAD and all the verticals, AutoCAD LT included, supports a maximum of 32,767 layers. You can create that many in your drawing, well, minus 2 of them. Layer 0 is a layer that is added by, it's a default. You can't do without it. It's the base for all other layers. You cannot rename it or delete it. Layer def points is also a layer that the user can create, but anytime you use something like a dimension style, any kind of dimension in your drawing, AutoCAD is going to create this layer by default. So these are 2 layers. It kind of cuts short on the layers that you can create, but I've never even seen a drawing close to that many layers.
Yeah, I was just going to say, this slide, it sort of scared me when I saw you put it together. We would recommend not creating 32,000 layers. Voker did a great webinar on XREFs and XREF management. If you haven't seen that one, I would recommend to take a look at that. But although it allows that many layers, you certainly would notice some significant performance issues. I think it's set to that so that you really won't ever run up against any problems with not being able to add the layers you need, but certainly for performance-wise, you would never want to try and approach that number.
Yeah, I concur. So here's some important things. Layer names can have up to 255 characters. These can be letters, numbers, spaces, and there are several special characters you can use. I've also listed which special characters you cannot use in a layer name, okay? And that's on the line second from the bottom here. Even though you can use several special types of characters, I would not go hog wild with that. We have in product support seen some issues with special characters used in various unique combinations or naming conventions. So I try to keep it fairly simple and, if anything, follow a standards guideline. And for those of you who are undoubtedly going to ask about standards, where can I find a layer standards guideline? At the end of this PowerPoint, I do have a link to a website where you can take a look at, I believe it's the AIA standards. And there are plenty of other resources out there for layer standards. I would also keep the layer names probably shorter than 255 characters. And the reason being, if you are working with XREFs, keep in mind that an XREF, when attached to your host drawing, will add not only that external reference file's name, but also the layer name within that file onto your layers, okay, into your layer dialog. So if you have a very lengthy layer name or a very lengthy drawing name that you're inserting as an external reference, and they have lengthy layer names, you could possibly exceed that limitation. I haven't seen it happen, but it could happen. So having said that, Some of the things that we can do in layers, well, in layers we can assign things like color, line type, and line weight to distinguish objects in our drawing to give it the design representation that we want to convey. Layers will also control, the layer property manager also controls layers, whether they can be seen or not seen. And this can be done either through a freeze or thaw function or an on or off function, which I'll talk more about later. I just realized I misspelled weather. I used the wrong weather. Awkward.
That's okay. Probably all the bad weather.
Yeah. We also have options to plot or not plot objects on a specific layer. So this is a real cool feature, as well as a lock or unlock function, which allows you to not modify or keeps you from modifying objects by accident on a specific layer. So let's see how all this works. I'll end my little show for right now, and we'll switch to AutoCAD. All right, so the first thing we want to take a look at is where are all these tools? Well, they are on the Home tab. Very convenient place for these, since layers are next to the undo command. The layer command is the most frequently used command in AutoCAD. So we have our layer properties manager, okay, and that just brings up a palette like this. Actually, this is it right here. It's not just like this. This is it. We also have a layer drop-down control, and this allows us to work with layers as well to do simple modifications, make a layer current. We also have tools here to do that as well. There's some additional tools. I'll cover some of these tools, but we are going to run out of time if I tried to cover all of them. Always note that there are additional commands on the ribbon, and in some cases you'll see a little drop-down arrow. So again, there are more tools right here that you can be working with to give you more flexibility when working with layers. And so this is the layer palette, and by default right now I'm in a new drawing, so it's just showing me the layer 0. And just briefly, I'm going to switch over to a drawing with many more layers, and you'll see how this dynamically updates. Okay, and that's some nice functionality there, because I can have this open on a second monitor and work on different drawings and always have the layer states available here. We have some tools here to create filters. Keep in mind, a lot of layers can be created, and we may want to create filter groups to compartmentalize those layers so that we don't have to work through 400 layers. We can work through maybe 10. And I'll show you how that works in a bit. We have the Layer States Manager here. All of these have nice tooltips over them, so quick explanation about them, or you can hit F1 with this dialog box palette app active, and it'll take you right into that layer command of the help file. Here we create a new layer. Note the control keys, Alt-N would do that as well in this dialog. Here we can freeze, new layers in a viewport, delete a layer. Delete layer, keep in mind, if there's anything on a layer, you're not going to be able to delete it. If the layer is current, you're not going to be able to delete it. So it's like anything in AutoCAD. If it's being used, if it's referencing something else, you're not going to be able to get rid of it. This icon here allows me to set a layer current. By setting it current, we're making it the active sheet of drawing paper. So why would we want to create a bunch of other layers? Well, if we used only that one sheet of paper, we would have something like this. I'm going to go ahead and put that in the auto hide. And selecting all this, you'll see it's all on layer 0. Okay, we can tell that because if it were on more than one layer, this would show various, and this would be grayed out up here. Okay, right now, by having selected these objects, it's telling me on this drop-down control what layer those objects reside on. Well, that makes it hard to work with this stuff. Let's say I want to print this out. I don't want to see the chairs. I don't want to see the grid lines. There's no real easy way to remove those from the plot without maybe erasing them. If we have layers, we can control the visibility of this drawing much better. So, one reason to have layers. Now, what I'm going to do in here is go through the process of just creating a simple drawing using layers and show you the functionality of this dialog for those who have never really worked with creating layers. For those of you who have, sorry, we're going to go through this. All right, so first of all, layer 0 is the current layer. I'm going to go ahead and click on here and create new layer. And by default, it is called layer 1. If I were to click new again, it would be layer 2 and so forth. We want to do some unique names. I'm going to call my first layer exterior. And then I can apply a color to it. So there are other functions here we'll talk about later. But I want the color of the exterior here to be red, and I'll click OK. I'm going to create another new layer, but this time, just for grins, I'm going to right mouse click. You'll see that all the options for this layer dialog, as well as some additional options, are available from the context menu. So I'm just going to go ahead and click new layer. And notice that layer 1 picks up the properties of the previous layer I created. So if you're going to create numerous layers that use one color for one pin weight, this is a quick way to do it. We'll call this interior. And I'm going to go ahead and change the color on it because I do want it to be different. Click cyan. And then I'm going to go ahead and apply a line type. I actually need 2 line types. My next layer is going to be center for center lines. Now, all I have here is a continuous line type. Well, line types by default are not stored in a drawing. We have to load them from an external text file. So I click on load, and you'll see we have these AutoCAD _ISO line types. If you're working with imperial units, stay away from these. These are scaled for metric units. You want to scroll down, and you'll see pretty much the same line types in an imperial unit. And I'm going to go ahead and select center, but I also need the hidden one for the current layer I'm working on. So scrolling down some more, I'm going to go ahead and use the control key and select hidden, and I'll click OK. Now, if I were just to close this, continuous would still be applied. So I want to go ahead and select hidden, click OK. I'm going to go ahead and select layer 0 right now because my next layer would pick up the properties, and I don't want to change all, well, I don't need all those properties. I'm going to go ahead and click on new, and we'll call this center. Give it a color yellow, and then I'm going to go ahead and give it the center line type. So for some of you, this is pretty redundant. You know how to do this. Others may never have worked with it. So for those of you who are being patient, I appreciate that. I'm going to click OK here. All right, so I've created 3 new layers. Now I want to draw on those layers. And first of all, I'm just going to, again, we could set a layer current by clicking on this button. I could right mouse click, set the layer current, or you'll see that there's this status column. If I just double click on this icon, that makes a layer current. Go put this in auto hide mode. I'm going to draw a circle, and we'll give 4 units here. And Again, I could make this layer current by clicking in here or clicking on this icon. So I'll select interior, click on this icon, it's made it current. Now I'm going to draw another circle. I'll use the last reference point function for my base point or center point. I'll give it a measurement of a radius of 2. I want to draw one more piece of line work, and that is a center line. This time I'm going to use this drop-down list. I'm going to choose center, and now it is the current layer. I could have also gone into the control, into the properties palette and changed it here as well. But either way, I want to just use center. And I'm going to draw a line, and this is something we did in our one of our previous webinars, object tracking. I'm going to go ahead and reference the center point, point straight up, and 6 units from that center is where I want my line work to start. Then using direct distance entry, I'm going to type 12 to create a line 12 units long with the midpoint being the center. I'm also going to go ahead and use a grip here. I'm going to go into a rotate mode. I'm going to go into a copy mode and exit. I've quickly created center lines. Okay, we all know how to draw circles and lines, but there is a reason for this, why I'm doing this, because we have more stuff in the layer properties dialog. One of those, or two of those options, are how we control what is being displayed. We have this on column and the freeze column. By default, layers are going to be turned on and thawed. The thaw is like a little a ray of sunshine, okay, this little icon. And a working light bulb means it's on. I'm going to explain what the difference is here. When you turn a layer off, AutoCAD knows it's still there. It just doesn't, it's not displaying it. When you freeze it, AutoCAD says, okay, I'm putting this in the archives. It's being ignored no matter what you do in the drawing. I'm not going to allow you to touch this at all. So let's see how that works. I'm going to go ahead and get off of that layer dialog here. I'm zooming to extents. Notice the extents of the drawing are to the edge of the vertical line. And I'm going to go ahead and make layer 0 current right now. And I'm doing this all from the drop-down control. I'm just going to go ahead and tell AutoCAD I want to turn off layer center. Now if I zoom to extents, note the distance between the circle and the edge of the drawing. AutoCAD knows that the center lines are still there. I'll go ahead and turn that on, and this time I'm going to freeze layer center and see how it ignores the center lines now. So that should be a good example of what the difference between thaw or freezing and turning off a layer. Again, if I now thaw that, there we go. You'll see that we have our line work there. A layer that's frozen cannot be made current. A layer that's turned off can be current. You'll get a warning. You can actually still draw on a turned off layer and not realize it. So be careful with that. Did you have anything there, Sean? Or
that was actually one of the questions that came in, and I answered it in the chat window as well. But there was a question: difference between on/off and freeze thaw. So I'm glad that you covered that. And I was sort of frantically typing, answering questions. So I apologize if I missed if you said it. But did you mention the other difference with on/off and freeze thaw is the regeneration of the file?
I did not, and I'm glad you pointed that out.
That's important in big files or
yes,
intensive
indeed.
files.
Yes, indeed. In fact, in the past, back in the day, all right, I mean, I remember a drawing taking 45 minutes to regenerate. and
Right.
large civil drawing or something, and which of course is not that big of an issue nowadays. But if you want to speed up your drawing, and you do have something like a layer with lots of contours on them, and you just don't need to see that, freeze that layer, and it will. Even turning it off helps a lot graphically, but freezing it will have the database ignore it and not have to recalculate all the stuff for that layer, and it does speed things up more better.
Yeah.
Sean, thanks for bringing that up.
No, it's okay. I mean, I was going to say hatching's a big one too. Hatching is one of the most intensive things in AutoCAD. So if you have a lot of hatching in your file, it's always good practice to freeze those until you need them for plotting, for instance. But if you don't need them visually, always a good idea to freeze those until you do need them, and you'll notice some. Typically, especially in bigger files, you'll notice much better performance.
Yes,
there.
And text as well.
Yeah, there was actually another question about this that just came in before we move on. If a layer is frozen and you decide to move the circles, will the frozen layer move with the circles?
No, AutoCAD ignores it. Okay, so and the same thing pretty much works with the off command. You still need to be careful though. If you use something like select all, you're going to move the stuff. AutoCAD still knows it's there. But freezing it, it's going to ignore it. So yeah, you do need to be aware of what's going on in your drawing.
Right.
All right.
There were a couple other questions. Do you want those before you move on?
I think we better move on for right now. We can get back to those.
Sounds good.
Yeah, burning up a little bit of time here. All right.
Sure thing.
So I am going to cover transparency real quick, and I'm just going to kind of do this drawing a rectangle. I'm just going to go, actually, let's do it this way. I want to show you one more neat little trick in the layer dialog. I'm going to click on New, and I'm going to create a layer called H1, and then I'm going to create another layer. I'm going to do this by putting a comma after H1. Notice how now it says layer 1 again, and I'm going to type H2. So I've created two layers quickly. I'm going to go ahead and assign both of these a color of magenta. Yeah, I could have actually selected both those layers at the same time using the Control or Shift keys, just so you know. I can also sort by name here, okay? But the point is that I'm going to set this one current, and I'm going to create a rectangle here. I'm just typing it in to speed things up. And then I'm going to go into the hatch command. I could type in hatch. And I'm going to go ahead and go into the hatch properties and tell it, look, options. I don't want you to use any boundaries. Oh, there it is. Ignore island detection. Okay? So now, a lot of times you'll need something like this. So you've got grading maybe on something, or you need to have this hatch here. We do have options to send this to the background, and in AutoCAD we can actually apply a transparency to an object itself. Oh, there we go. Fingers are twitching here, sorry people. Okay, but we can also make things transparent by layer. So I'm going to go ahead and just select this, and I'm going to change the hatch on that one to layer 2. I'm going to go ahead now and go into the layer manager, and there is a column here for transparency. So layer H1, I want that to be screened, that hatch. I want it to be screened quite a bit. So we have a value of 0 to 90. I'm going to click OK. And now you'll see a big difference between the two hatches because we've added transparency to this one here. So, very cool. All right, I thought so anyway. All right, take a look at two more things here real quick, and then we'll do some modifications. One of those is we can assign line weights to our layers, okay? Or there are other ways to do this as well, but pretty much anything you put on a layer is going to pick these things up as a default, unless you assign properties to an object. I want everything to be kind of a default here, and I'm just going to go ahead and change this to something we can easily see. Let's do 40, just so we can see it. That's my centerline layer. Now, nothing's happened, right? Well, there's a reason for that. There's a line weight control that we need to enable. And if you don't see it on your status bar, you can enable that and make it available on the status bar by going to that menu there. Now, as I turn that on, my hatches are actually kind of in the way here. As I turn that on, you can see the line weight appearing quite a bit thicker. So that's how we can assign a line weight. Quickly, I'm going to go back into, let's see, I'm on layer H1 right now. We'll leave it there. That's fine. I'm going to lock a layer. Okay, lock or unlock a layer from this control right here. So notice how H1 has faded out some more right now. Maybe I should also lock H2 just to show you. See how that fades out? That shows me those layers are locked. And on top of the crosshair, there's a little lock icon. So that also indicates it's locked. Now, H1 is the current layer, a locked layer. I'm going to go ahead and just draw some line work. And notice how it's allowing me to draw that line work. But if I try to select it, notice there aren't any grips. That shows me, okay, I've selected this stuff, but it's not in a selectable mode to where I can do anything to it. I'm going to go type E for erase, enter. It's not going to erase it. It tells me on the command prompt that 4 were found on a locked layer. And basically, sorry, buddy, you're out of luck. All right. So moving on, because I don't want to leave out what I wanted to show. We're going to go back to this everything drawn on one sheet of paper drawing and use some modify tools to change this to where it looks, not the whole drawing, but portions of it will make it look more better. Yeah. Sean?
Just one quick question while you were on the transparency. There's several questions came in around how the transparency is affected with plotting, and does it affect the plotted output or not?
It does. You do need to enable, good question. So going into, say, the plot dialog, you do need to enable plot transparency in order for this to work. And the reason for that, part of it's resources. Sean, help me out on this one here. There were other, I think, resources and also the hardware you're plotting to.
Yeah, there's a few different factors in there. We could probably, spend 15 minutes really going over it. So I don't think we want to get too deep into it time-wise, but with that checkbox on, and then a lot of it depends on the settings of your actual plot device. So when you go into the plot window, you may want to go into the settings of your plot device as well, and there's sometimes settings in there depending on what your output is. But yeah, a good rule of thumb I've found is to just check that plot transparency that Volker showed, and then go ahead and send a plot. And in a lot of cases, it's going to be correct. If not, then you'll want to go into the settings of the plotter itself and see what settings are in there. We could get into it a little bit further. Maybe in a future webinar, Volker, we can dedicate some time to that. But time-wise, I think we could get off track pretty quick here if we
we'll have
too deep into that.
One day we'll put together a webinar that's an FAQ of questions that were asked at other webinars.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
It is, actually. All right, so let's take a look at this here. I need to modify this. Now, we can easily select an object and put it on the proper layer. So in this case here, we have a layer called chairs, and I had selected it, selected the drop-down control, and now Even though layer 0 is current, this is now on the chairs layer. All right, there's a lot of chairs here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use quick select, and I'm going to tell, look, I want to select all block references that are named chair 7. And is that one still selected? No, good. All right, and I'm going to click OK. And so it selects all those. And notice because one is already on layer chairs, the rest are all on layer 0. This is grayed out. Here it tells me varies in the property palette. So what I'm going to do now is change all of those to the chairs layer. So that's one way to do that. Another way to quickly update your other layer objects. Here's another block. This is a computer block here. I'm going to go ahead and right mouse click after selecting it and say select similar. And it tells me 66 items were selected. So I'm going to go here again, and I'm going to just put those on the CPU layer. As I maybe do some of these here, maybe I want to turn those off for the time being so that I can just focus on the stuff that I still need to modify in the drawing. Since most of these things are blocks, I could go through this and modify them. But after a while, you have some dumb line work maybe. You know, this here, there's no intelligence to it. It's just a line. You're going to have to do some manual work to layer this properly. So the bottom line is, as you're working, use layers as you're drawing stuff. You can always put stuff, modify it and put it on a new layer, but or on a layer after the fact. But it's best to draw this stuff on the layers as you're working. All right, a couple more examples, and then we can take some more questions. So first thing I'd like to show in here is that a difference here where by layer comes in handy. So I'm in this drawing. My boss says, hey, look, all these panels right here, we actually need them a different pin color, so they plotted a different pin weight. And I'm going to go ahead, and there's a function here called isolate layer, lay ISO. We'll use that. But obviously, since these were all drawn with no mistakes on one layer, all I really have to do is go here, and on the panels 201, I'm going to change the color to color 140. I can type it in or pick it off of the swatch there. I'll click OK. And as I do that, I notice, hey, somebody messed up here. They drew this. So it's got the wrong color. Is it on the wrong layer? I select it, and it tells me, nope, it's on panels 201. It's just that the color assigned to it is magenta. So this is a good time to be using something like layer isolate. I'm going to go ahead and select that, and notice how all these other layers are now faded out and they're actually locked. So what I can do now is use a command called set by layer, and this is actually under the modify panel. You can also type in set by layer. And what it allows me to do is select objects in the drawing. I'm just going to type all, okay? It's going to select everything here in model space. And it tells me how many it's found and how many are on a locked layer. And notice only the panels are the ones that are highlighted. So now I'm going to change all of those. They've all been changed, I should say, to a by layer property. Whoops. Oops, I canceled out that. Awkward moment. You guys should, for those who have been here, you know me well enough, I do this at times. Keeps everybody on their toes.
We like the awkward moments.
All right, I am being prompted to, do I want to change by block to by layer? Yes. Oh, Sean, can you post that link in the chat window? I'll talk about it in a moment. By block to by layer, yes. Include blocks, sure, why not? And now it's modified everything and set it all to a by layer property. Since we would be running out of time, Sean has posted a link to a video I've put together which explains the difference between by block, by object, and by layer. And if you aren't familiar with those terms or you want to know more about it, it's worthwhile watching this demo of the differences between those topics. Okay, having done that, I've set everything back to by layer, and now I'm going to go ahead and, where's my layer? Layer previous. Where is it? There it is. All right, so layer previous here is another way of unisolating those objects. It just brings everything back to prior, changing the layer state, the lock state. Okay, you can use it anytime. You want to freeze layers or so and then do some work, you can then use layer previous to bring back the state as it was prior to you changing those layers. All right, so again, I'm in this drawing. Other people work on it. I want to see what's been going on. What work has been done in this drawing? And what I'll do, because going into the layer properties palette here, let's take that off of auto hide for a moment. I can tell that some of these layers, and I'm going to sort by on or off, some are off, and there are actually some that are frozen, and there aren't that many layers here. Only 31 are being used, okay? But you can get 400, 500, 600 layers, and 100 of those are turned off maybe. And you're just doing something in the drawing that you really maybe viewing to see how far the project is or whatever, and you have to turn on those layers or thaw them. But then you have to put them back by the time you're done, right? In case if you make an annotation, you can't just close without saving. So what I'm going to do is create a layer state of the current condition of these layers. And, whoops, wrong button. And that button is right here, Layer States, Manager. We could also right mouse click and select Save Layer States. Okay, so this is a quick dialog here, but I want to show you the full dialog. There's a lot more to it than what you just saw. So options, get familiar with this by clicking on Help. We're not going to have time in this one here. I'm going to go ahead and create a new one. Let's get rid of that one. Create a new one, and I'll call it Default. I'll click OK and close. And now I'm going to go ahead and thaw these layers under the off, on. I'm going to pick on these here and just turn them all on. And let's go ahead and auto hide that. And so there's a lot more stuff here than I initially saw. So I can review it. I can add some text, leaving a note of what may need to be done to complete the project. And then I want to put it back to how it was. So going back into the Layer States Manager, I'll go ahead and go in there and I'll restore this state. And there we are. So it's a good way to, you can create numerous states for plotting purposes or whatever. There's a lot more to layer states, obviously, but this at least lets you know it's there, and you can get started with it and go into the help for more information while in that dialog. Just hit F1 and it'll take you to that help file. One more example and we can take questions. Actually, one short one and one longer one. So here, I talked about the no plot layer earlier. I've got some viewports here. And selecting these viewports, it shows me they're on layer 0, which means they're going to plot. Now, I like to see the viewports, but I don't like them on my plotted output. Others do. You know, it's choice. It's a organizational standard. Personally, I create a layer, and I call it Viewports or Viewport or VP, something like that. And I do need to, whoops, kind of zoomed out there. I do need to go in here to do this. There is this icon here that is a printer icon. And right now, the way it is, it's showing me it is set to not plot. So having selected those, I'm just going to go here and select viewports. They're now on that layer, and later on they won't plot. Now in a plot preview, be aware of this, those viewports will show up, but on the final output they will not. Okay? All right. So we use that example of maybe screening out to override the hatch pattern. Well, in viewports, we actually have a lot more control. Let's say I want all the, you know, this side here, the left side, to look as is when plotted. But in this one here, I'd like to point out to whoever's viewing it that this is the new furniture we put into place, okay, the new work desks. So what I'm going to do is make this viewport active. And now if we expand the layer palette, expand, Voker, expand. My fingers are not moving well today. You'll see we have extra columns now. These are duplicates, basically, of on, freeze, lock, etc. But they are called viewport overrides. Okay, and that's what these are for. And it allows me to give things a different look. So like I said, I want the furniture to stand out. So I'm going to select furniture, and I'm going to right mouse click. And I'm going to say, look, let's go ahead and invert my selection. And then, because all of these are selected, I'm just going to select one color swatch. And I'm going to change it to color 9, which is that light gray. Click OK. And having done that, I grabbed the wrong viewport. I told you I was going to do it to this one, but I made this one active. So having done that, it grayed everything out and left the furniture standing out a little bit more. So it's a great way to make viewports, give viewports a different representation from other viewports. We could use plot styles to accomplish the same thing, but I guess it all depends on, again, your standards, your organization, how you want to do things. There's a purpose for plot styles, and there's a purpose for overrides. All right, so how can I tell I have overrides here? First of all, just with this viewport active, you'll see that the drop-down control has a bit of a highlight to it now. That tells me there are layers that are being overridden. And going into the layer properties palette, whoops, you'll see that that highlighting is also applied to layers that have been affected by the override. So furniture is the only one that does not have an override applied to it. How do I get rid of the overrides? I'm glad you asked. I'm going to go ahead and right mouse click, and we have remove viewport overrides for all layers, in current viewport only, in all viewports, or selected layers. Well, I want to do all layers in all viewports, even though I only modified one. And it removes the override, and everything looks normal again. Phew. All right. that is about it. I do want to show one more thing. I lied. Let's open up and keep this out of auto hide mode. And what I'm going to do is scoot the drawing over, and I'm just going to plop in a linear dimension. Now, kind of watch. We have center, exterior, H1, H2, interior. So I'll go ahead and select, pick a point. Now watch what happens in the layer dialog after I pick my second point. Place my dimension. Notice the new layer, def points. That's where this comes from. You've probably seen it in a lot of older drawings. Note that the no plot icon is grayed out. So nothing on that layer plots. The reason this thing exists is because of the definition points of a dimension, the anchor to the object where that grip is, so that they don't plot. Okay, that's what that's all about. In the past, we'd use this for viewports, or we could freeze or turn off a viewport if we didn't want it to plot. I've even seen people do both. I know people have an explanation for that. I've never felt there was a reason for that. But that's me. Everybody does things different. So let's move on to a couple of things on the slide deck real quick, and then we'll take some more questions. Okay?
Yeah, we got quite a few of them, so
I'm sure we do. I'm sure we do. So in the slide deck, when you download, if you want to download it, there's some resources. Here's to that screencast video I had Sean put in the chat window. There's also a link to a PDF of the United States National CAD Standard. So if you're interested in that, it's a good standard. Here's our upcoming webinars. Working with style, we'll talk about working with text and dimension styles, creating those, the good and bad of doing certain things, creating and using templates. We had a lot of requests for this one, so we're going to do it. Duplicating objects, so copy commands, array commands, offset commands, stuff like that. The Content Explorer, a newer version of Design Center, basically. And we have many more on the docket as well. So let's go ahead and take those questions, Sean.
All right. So just before we won't get to all the questions. I can tell you that just by looking at the time and seeing what we have. So if we don't get to a question you asked, please post that into the feedback link that will be sent with your follow-up email, and we will do our best to answer it in that forum. So just to go through them quick, there was a question about layer 0 and if it's bad practice to use objects on layer 0, and it's not necessarily. It's really just comes down to organization. So where we typically see the most trouble is when people use layer 0 almost as sort of a dumping ground for everything that they don't know where else to put it, and so you end up with just a lot of junk stuff on layer 0. And that's when you can start to run into trouble. So it's not necessarily a bad thing to use layer 0, but if you are using it, make sure it's in an organized fashion, and that you're careful about what you're using it for.
And let me add to that. You have 32,000 layers you can create, 32,000 plus. They're not that hard to create. In the long run, you can organize and modify things a lot easier. I personally, the only time I use layer 0 is when I'm creating blocks. Okay? Otherwise, I create specific layers for anything I do.
Yeah, and sometimes we'll get files sent in to us where they just have everything on layer 0 without any of the layers, and that's not a great thing.
Yeah,
so
makes it hard to troubleshoot.
Yeah. So there was another question, Volker. Can you merge several layers into one?
You can, actually. One of the many tools we weren't able to cover. But if you take a look, where is it? Merge. Hey, wow, first one. Okay, yeah, so this merges selected layers into one target layer.
Perfect. Is there a difference between using set by layer or choosing it in the properties box?
Set by layer allows you to So there's a difference. I mean, I could select everything in the drawing and then set it all to by layer, yes. But what the set by layer command does is if an object has an assignment of by block instead of by object, or if you have blocks that have colors assigned to them, it will go into those blocks and also set that to a by layer if you give it that option. So what it does, basically, it goes into the nested level that's just going through properties you can't get to, if that makes sense, hopefully.
Yep, that's very good. There was also a question, can you pre-select which layer to insert things like XREFs or other objects onto without having that layer as your current layer?
No. I mean, you could.
Yes, you can't.
So like if you had a palette or something, where you added a macro that would set a current and then insert an XREF, or a toolbar icon where you do that, but there's no way to just say anytime I insert an XREF, put it on layer XR.
Right. The other thing with individual objects, and you covered this in a previous webinar, is you can create blocks, and as part of your block library, you can determine when you drag and drop it from that palette that it automatically goes to a certain layer or a certain color. But that's for individual objects and not necessarily XREFs. So it's a good wish list item, but not at this time. I did want to cover, because there's several questions as well about viewing the PowerPoints and the previous recordings. A lot of questions about folks not able to download them, and I didn't know, Volker, are they able to be downloaded, or are they just viewable just from the YouTube page?
So the YouTube, we've put no restrictions on downloading the videos, and I'm pretty sure that they have an option to download the videos. I think they may be referring to the PowerPoints, though. We did have a permissions issue or link issue. That's been resolved. Okay. In fact, I fixed it Friday of last week, and since then I've been getting all kinds of alerts saying, so, it doesn't give me a name, don't worry, just saying someone downloaded so-and-so PowerPoint from, your folder. So that's fixed. You can download those PowerPoints.
Okay. Great. So anybody that was having trouble with that, it sounds like it's resolved. If you're still having trouble, just again, please post that into the feedback link that will be sent out to you.
Yeah, send an email to the Autodesk.help email address there.
And let's see, 2 minutes. I'm gonna try and squeeze one more in. There were a couple questions about, you used AutoHide a few times, and there was just a couple questions on if you could just briefly just say again when you would use that, why you would turn it on or off, and just sort of a brief description of AutoHide once more.
Okay, yeah, no problem. All palettes are going to have that function in AutoCAD. In the properties palette here, when to use it, how I can't tell you that. That's a working preference. If I do use it, I like just putting it into an allow docking mode, and then typically I would say go ahead and anchor this to the right, and that way it's always there, and as soon as I move off of it, it goes into an auto hide mode. Notice my tool properties palette, it has that same functionality, but I like my property palette to always be available. If I don't select anything, it gives me general information about the drawing I'm in. What the current scale is, what the current layer is set to. But if I select something, I can easily modify it using it. So, it all depends on your workflow. I hardly ever, if I leave a palette in a mode where it's not in a docked state like this, okay, and I hardly ever work with it where it's an auto hide mode floating. If I'm going to have it floating somewhere, it's going to be on a second monitor, and it's going to be open like this. But everybody has their own preference.
Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to, is it's another tool in AutoCAD to try and make things a bit easier for you. If you have certain palettes that you're using all the time, it's a way that enables you to leave them on screen, and just by putting your mouse over them, it will expand up and you can quickly get to it. So it's meant to save you a few clicks here and there. So some may pick and choose which ones to leave open and which ones to just always have off. It really depends on what you use most often.
Right. So, Sean, and everybody, Sean and I, we thank you both all for being here. We know your time's valuable. We do have one quick survey poll. Sean, can you run that before we leave? We just want to find out if you got anything out of this, if it was worth your time being here.
And also, while we're running this poll, the thing we also like the feedback page for is suggestions on what you want to see in future webinars. So our main goal is to make these as productive as possible for you guys, the users. So feel free to use that feedback link as well for subjects you want to see in future webinars. And almost 100% learn something new, so that's really great to see.
Yeah, for those who didn't, we thank you anyway for being here, and we hope to see everybody again next week. So take care, everybody. Thank you again.
Have a great day.